It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back into another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, a day after the first day of January for 2025, as we look back. Yes, that's what we're doing as our holiday break continues. And a reminder, if you are travelling around the country on the roads today, go easy. There is a lot of impatient drivers, only too willing to take a risk, all to gain just one position in the line of traffic. It is a Friday and the second day of January, just in case you've lost track. And we are back into the time tunnel with our summer series of real estate.
The Real Estate Podcast wishes you and your family a fantastic Christmas break and a happy new year ahead. You're listening to the summer series on the Real Estate Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I mean, the trend of bringing the outside inside, that certainly represented that. I mean, I think my best was seeing a horse on a third floor in an apartment, so it probably beats that one.
Well, hang on, you got to tell that story. You saw a horse in an apartment?
Yeah, we had a jockey that had gone a little bit mad in Kingsford and thought it was a good idea to bring his horse home.
Is this a real story, or is this a wind-up?
This is a real story. It's nearly a 20-year-old story, but it's definitely a real story.
What, you walk in and you see the horse and you go, something doesn't quite feel right here?
There was a complaint, so we were there to address the situation. But yeah, it was pretty wild. I've always said it'd be a really good book, you know, the diaries of a real estate agent and the things that we've seen in open for inspections or properties that we've managed.
What about Lismore? Are you represented in there?
Yeah, I was there for the floods.
Yeah.
I'd only just bought the business, so that was a pretty dramatic time. We had 4 of our team members lose their homes. So we do a lot for charity, but at that stage, we gave back to our team. So we raised money for our team and supported our team. But with this recent weather, you know, I was pretty active talking about the media. There's so much anxiety with what's happened and the reports, you know, like I was tracking it from back in Port Macquarie and, you know, you're seeing photos, you know, online and even with media outlets showing pictures of the last flood at this time. So it was very misleading. I'm asking that, you know, next time we have a weather pattern, if our media and even other government bodies, they definitely need to be factual. But I felt like there was scare tactics this time and a lot of our local community think the same. It was a really big moment. I mean, I burst into tears when I got to Lismore. It wasn't just the water. We had floods the year before in North Haven, but it was actually how dramatic they'd gone through. It was like a war zone.
Yeah, no, last week we spoke to Laura there in Brisbane. She was talking about her property, and while it's on the flood map, she had some advice from the real estate company saying, well, what you should do is take photos as the flood comes in so that if you're not affected, you've got that information to actually bring forth. I thought that was fantastic information.
2 things on that. I mean, one, Lismore, I do want to give them a massive compliment. Up and down the coast, we've got a Falvale Drive. It's one of the most vibrant towns. The amount of restaurants, cafes and cool little shops that have opened up, that town just bounces back. I own a caravan park in Port Macquarie, and what I'm talking about, the warnings, is they actually sent a text for an evacuation and people woke up at 1:30 in the morning. They woke up all my guests and they all left in a panic and the water was below, it was actually low tide. So it's those type of things that I think as a community we can do better. We're
going to talk about the development of townhouses. Now, people have been doing this, Alec. They've been developing these townhouses, sort of doing a reno on them, making some money, but they do have that land tax and it's not for everybody. You would recommend buying one block and doing something special with that?
For sure. So, Craig, I believe that traditionally the best way to make money in Manningham, probably this goes for a majority of the country, I would say, is you're building multiple units. You might sell 2 or 3, keep 1 or 2. You might even do a boutique apartment building. There's a lot of money in that. Now, in the last, particularly since the COVID era, in the last 3-4 years after lockdown, the costs of building have risen 40%. The costs of building basements have absolutely skyrocketed, and it's been eating into all the developers' profits. So people are still doing that, don't get me wrong, but I firmly believe that you can make a lot more money, particularly with interest rates being as high as what they typically are now. If you're paying 7% interest and construction is 2 to 3 million and it takes you 2-3 years to do what you got to do the numbers, you're paying over $200,000 in interest. So for me, I would personally buy a block, and this is what I'm advising a lot of my clients typically now. Buy a block in our area, for example, which is 650 squares, maybe 700 square meters for 1.2, pay 1.3 of the stamp. So roughly you build it for about $1 million, potentially 1.2. It's cost you $2.5 million if you're following me. After that, you sell that brand new home after about a year or so of living in there. So hopefully you're not paying any CGT, and you've just made $1 million tax-free. You haven't had to go through council for plans and permits because it's only one dwelling. The build process is only taking you 6 to 12 months. And you've got your money within 18 months. Then you can do the exact same project. In 3 years, you can do it twice, make a cool $2 million, or someone else may still be finishing their first townhouse project in the same period of time.
Now, talking of money, we better talk about this because later on this afternoon, the RBA, they're going to be having this meeting. And by the way, if you're not already following the Real Estate Podcast, make sure that you do follow us, because this afternoon we will have that the second that announcement is called from the RBA. This is kind of, I think, a 50-50 scenario. What do you think might happen? We've got one of those cuts that's already in the bag, which is banked. What do you think is likely to happen this afternoon?
I really agree with you. I feel like it's a flip of the coin. If I had to put my life in it, I might say they're likely to hold it. I don't believe inflation is completely under control right now. In the media, they've been saying that they're likely going to be 2 to 3 cuts this year. So if that's the case, I don't know if they're going to do 2 to 3 in a row. I would have thought they would have spaced it out a bit. However, I would love to be proven wrong. It would definitely make our job a lot easier, because I've noticed an amazing shift in the buyer mentality ever since that first cut.
Hey, great to find out a little bit about Doncaster and the surrounding suburbs. Enjoy April Fool's Day today, the 1st of April, and have a great one for the rest of 2025.
I really appreciate it, mate. When I was told about this podcast and I saw the date, I was a bit worried it's going to be a April Fool's joke. So I'm glad it's real.
No, it's all worked out. It's all panned in your favour.
Sounds great, mate. But I really appreciate it, and you have a great day.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of competition, I think. So, I'll be 35 this year. So I'm at that sort of age where, I'm looking for a home. I'm sort of a little bit over renting. I feel like there's definitely a lot of people my age in the same position. So they're the sort of people that you will see looking at sort of properties where maybe you don't have kids right now, but you could maybe have one in that space. So a lot of people are looking at, those properties probably between, 550,000 and 750,000 is kind of a decent budget, I guess, for people my age that have worked and saved for a while. Other side of the competition, I guess, is people looking to downsize. So I've been to a few inspections, and you sort of gauge the sort of people that are there and maybe have a little chat with them and, see what they think about the property. So that's a little bit tough as well, because they obviously have worked a lot longer. They've been able to save more money. So they would be more willing to maybe put in a higher offer than maybe someone my age. And then you've got also parents who, their children my age or maybe a bit older are still living at home, perhaps even a little bit younger, and they're, trying to help them get a home so that they can move out of home. So then, sort of like a independent sort of woman in her 30s, it's a little bit harder, I think, to get in really.
And you sort of touch on the subject, you're 35. Having children for many women in their 30s, it's unrealistic because they're trying to get onto the property ladder. There's this whole financial strain of trying to get onto the property ladder, and then have you got enough money to actually raise a child? How much of an occupation in your mind has that sort of taken up?
It's definitely always in the back of my mind. I think when I was in my 20s, it was sort of less prevalent back then, slightly different priorities, as I mentioned. I feel like, definitely women my age in their 30s mid-30s are definitely, it's in the back of our minds for sure, because we do get told, even by our own families, or when you go for your doctor's visit, they're like, oh, you're nearly that geriatric age. And I'm like, oh, that's 100% accurate, but it's true, really. It's a thought that I think is there. I'm actually trying to imagine my sort of life right now and having to pay a mortgage and then also raise one or two children and also have to work as well. So there's a lot there.
As you were talking, it just sort of made me realise that the real estate sector and the fact that we've had all the rises over the last 5 years, it has probably fuelled the IVF sector, because women having children later, many of them need IVF. So there's this unfortunate correlation with the IVF probably booming.
Yes, I personally don't know if I'd go down that way. I mean, I know people that have done it and it's worked for them. I've known a few that are still on that journey. Their sort of feedback is, I wish I did it sooner. I tried to have a family, but, their circumstances might have been that they were studying for many years and trying to get into get their career started. You sort of think maybe you have a bit more time. Maybe you don't have a partner that you've met yet, so you might be single for a long time, and then you might meet someone in your mid-30s, and then, you don't expect to sort of get things going with them straight away and have a family. So IVF is an option. You can freeze your eggs as well. There's a bit of a culture with that at the moment. People are like, oh, have you considered this? Maybe I should do it. It's not something I'm going to do. If it happens, I guess it will happen for me.
While Sydney was up almost 30%, Brisbane up almost 70%, Adelaide over 70%, and Perth up 75%. So we can see that Melbourne really has lagged over the course of the past 5 years. But I think, this underperformance is probably actually its biggest strength going forward. Prices are cheaper, there's less affordability pressures, and that sets the stage for a bit of a turnaround in Melbourne, which we are seeing at the moment. We've seen investors jump back into that market over the course of probably the last 6 months, with those slower price growth, but still strong rental growth, producing pretty solid or pretty good rental yields in Melbourne. So I think, it's going to see some potentially some good growth over the next 5 years.
And want to drill down on what you think there, Matthew, about global events, whether or not they're going to shake up the market with a potential US recession being talked about. And all of that uncertainty in the US. Australia's property market faces all of those external risks, of course. Investors might pull money from stocks and put it into real estate, keeping prices up. What do you think? What's that global event shake-up likely to do?
You're correct there in saying that, investors will be looking at the relative stability that real estate offers compared to stocks. And definitely, with the US stock market down significantly since the inauguration of the new president, I think real estate does have a home for that, some of that capital. I think really for Australia, though, and Australian real estate, it probably affects our interest rates or what the RBA is thinking. And I think that means that the RBA will be a little bit more cautious given these global risks. I think we still will get a cut or two, which will help buyer sentiment and help drive the market. The RBA will, keep their powder dry, so they do have a bit more ammunition in the bank if there is a bit of a global shock, because cutting too early would leave them exposed and leave them with little ammunition to help stimulate the economy if US does go into recession, if the global economy does slow down too much.
Yeah, I can't see how the US is not going to go into a recession because of these trade tariffs, and a lot of confusion in the US where people just don't realise that the locals, anybody inside the US, they're the ones that are paying for the trade tariffs. Now, Trump says, well, I'm going to slap 25% on Canada and Mexico and all these other countries, but it's the population of America and the importers that are going to pay for that, and that is going to wreck the economy. You're right, the Dow Jones at the moment is completely tanking, and I'd say that that's going to tank even further.
I definitely think it's going to see the global economy slow down. But for Australia, I think it's really, China's the main market to look at there. Obviously, that's our key export, a key driver of the Australian economy. And given, China does export a lot of their products to the US, the slowdown in the Chinese economy will have an ultimate effect here in Australia, particularly in our mining sector. And we'll see, that GDP result probably soften again as the Chinese economy slows down as well, with the US economy going into recession.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.